Welcome to episode 0. So why am I doing this podcast? And what are you going to get out of it? Have you ever felt deep within that there's something more you're supposed to be doing, but you're not sure what? Have you ever felt like you're producing a lot, but not expressing at all? Welcome to She Made It. I'm your host, Elle Zimmerman, and I am on a mission to help you cultivate meaning through the path of creativity. Join me to eavesdrop on conversations with brave women who broke through their resistances into a life of authenticity. Because I believe if she made it, you can too. I am your host, Elle Zimmerman, and I'm so glad that you're here joining us on the podcast today. This is an opportunity to learn a little bit about what we're doing, why I'm doing it, and why I think it's going to be a great place for you to join in and eavesdrop on conversations with these incredible women that I'm bringing together to celebrate this journey of creativity. So I'm going to share a little bit of my bio, but this podcast is not about my bio. I just want to give you a little bit about me before we get started. So I grew up in Midwestern Ohio to a very entrepreneurial family, and I was destined from birth to be a performing artist. I was a singer, a dancer, and my childhood and my high school, college career all led me to performing. And I ended up getting a degree in musical theater, and I performed professionally for 15 years, but always had this desire to be a visual artist, creative, and sort of found that outlet through building businesses. But the real story behind why I'm doing this is I'm doing this podcast because I believe that I'm just like you. Actually, to be totally honest, we're a few days from launching the podcast. We're going to have a big launch party. And I was laying in bed on Saturday and I realized that I wasn't being fully truthful. That something was missing from our first few episodes, something was missing from the podcast, and that thing that was missing was my story, which I really didn't want to share. It's really scary for me. As an actress, I've spent my entire career acting out somebody else's life, stepping into the shoes of someone else and interpreting their experiences and not my own. And I struggle with my own visibility. And I've also realized that I have been focusing on the production and not the process, not my own process in this podcast journey. And I've realized, and I know that creativity is messy, it can be slow, it can be scary and frustrating. And I realized that I was hiding all that. I was doing a disservice to you, my listener, by not sharing my whole story. I had my own creative and spiritual awakening. And for me, it came in the form of a complete fragmentation and disconnect with myself. I was a shell of a human being. I wasn't feeling any emotion. I wasn't listening to any music. I wasn't doing anything for me. I wasn't doing anything. Nothing. And having come from a life filled with art and creativity, I don't know how I got on this path. I was very dutiful, and I loved being a mom. I was loving running a business, loving running a home, but I got lost in all of it. I got lost in perfectionism and the abundance of tasks. And as each part of my life evolved, it was one child, 2 children, 3 children, a dog, another dog, a home, a bigger home, the business growing, all wanting to do each area of my life perfectly. And even wanting to do it in ways that were not authentic to me because it was what I thought was expected of me. Having the parties, the dinner parties, having the extra special birthday celebrations for my kids, having the perfect Christmas card, perfect gifts for each person, getting my kids in the perfect school, being the perfect homework supporter, the perfect wife, the perfect yard. It was overwhelming. And I love doing things well. I enjoyed building businesses. I built 4 different businesses, all incredibly successful, and the business that I was in at the time was successful and growing, and the opportunities were growing. But none of it was what I wanted. None of it was from my soul. It was all from what I was supposed to do, what was expected of me, what I thought I was supposed to do. And because I loved performing, I had made the choice to have children. That was a very monumental change. I couldn't do that anymore. Especially because at that time, my husband's career took him from a local market to a national market. So at the time we started having children, he started traveling. And I didn't do any of this intentionally. I didn't do it in a way that was significant, but I stopped doing theater. I stopped going. I stopped paying attention. I stopped even listening to any sort of music. I didn't sing. I didn't pick up my guitar. I closed my heart to the love of my life, my art. And I actually did it in order to survive. And I did that for maybe 10 years. And I didn't even realize I was doing it. I didn't realize I had done it. But I slowly died inside. I became very unemotional. I remember watching commercials or funny YouTube videos, sad YouTube videos, and feeling nothing. And seeing people around me and wondering, what is wrong with me? I became like robotic in my drive to make the perfect home, create the perfect life, be the perfect mom. And on the outside, I did look super successful. But in the inside, there was nothing. I mean, nothing. There was no emotion. There was nothing positive other than a lot of exhaustion, anger, resentment. And I broke. And I like to say that I broke open rather than broke down. I broke open and I knew I needed help. And the first place I found it was through my creativity, through music, through art, through theater. It was a clue to me when it was probably, mid-2000s. I can't even remember now, but we went to a business conference in New York City. And I remember driving in the taxi from the airport to the hotel, and I was just like glowing. My body was vibrating. I couldn't sit back in my chair. I just felt so alive, and I hadn't felt this in years. I was just thrilled to be there, and then I just knew I had to see a show. And of course, I didn't plan ahead. I didn't even think about it. So I bought the first off-the-street, scalped ticket, overpriced ticket for The Little Mermaid, which happened to be the show right across the street from the conference hotel. It was like it didn't matter which show. It had to be any show, a show, and now. So I got tickets to The Little Mermaid, and I ended up sitting house left, second row on the end, basically right under their noses. And from the minute I walked in the theater until the minute the curtain dropped, I sobbed. I will never forget it. I will never forget that show. For how cheesy The Little Mermaid is, it was profound. And I didn't even pay attention. I didn't even ask why. I just thought, oh, I love theater. I love theater. I miss it so much. Oh, I love it. But I didn't really understand that I was dead and that this was the part of me just screaming, crying, throwing a temper tantrum, let me out, let me out. And so it was still another several years. I remember being on a plane from North Carolina to San Diego and sitting next to this elderly gentleman. I wouldn't say elderly, was quite young, but in his 70s, quite a dapper man. And he was from Scotland, and he just really wanted to have a conversation with me and just continued to ask me a question about, what do I do? What do I do? What's my art? Because I kept telling him I'm an artist. I want to perform again. I want to create. And he just stayed on me. He said, then do it. And it still took me years. I call it a creative awakening. For me, it was really a creative reawakening because I'd always been creative and I leaned toward creating, whether it was a business or gifts for people or even the way I ran the house, the way I would be creative in getting the kids to put their clothes away, to eat certain foods, to do activities. I just always brought creativity. It's just who I am. But it was not the creativity that feeds my soul. It wasn't the deep, visceral, soul-based creativity. It was more using my head. I call it my head creativity. How do I generate ideas? How do I create processes? How do I organize things? So I always thought I was being creative. It was the gut level, bringing something forth completely made out of me, out of nothing, for no purpose, that was missing. Just for the sake of art, just for the sake of pleasure of sound or sight or experience. It's been a journey. It's been a journey back, but I've learned to pay attention. I've learned to pay attention to what I lean toward, to what sparks my interest, to what makes my body vibrate and my tears flow freely. I can't say that at the time I would lean into what made me emotional or what gave me goosebumps because I wasn't feeling anything. But I would have an interest, or I'd want to learn more. I would notice things in people, things they were doing. I would always want to ask more questions about, especially those that were creating art or doing a creative business, almost with a little bit of jealousy, like, oh, I wish my business can do that. But it was really in the stopping and shining a mirror on myself, on my relationship, on my choices. It was shining the mirror that made me see how cut off and empty I was. And in shining that mirror, it required me to do a lot of work, a lot of searching, a lot of admitting, a lot of digging, excavating, all that needed to happen in order to uncover my creativity. But it was the creativity that literally saved me. It was sitting in my truth. It was turning on the radio. It was singing cheesy musical theater songs. It was dusting off my guitar. It was painting like the guy on the plane told me to just do. It was so scary and it felt so foreign. But by then I'd gotten into a life that was so full, so successful, so outwardly looking like the perfect life. And again, creative success, but it wasn't the childlike space of creativity. And because of my background in acting and because of my background as an entrepreneur, one of the gifts of both of those paths is that I'm not afraid to try pretty much anything. I've heard no hundreds of times in auditions. And I've tried business ideas that I had to quickly pivot and move away from because they were bad or they were failing. And because of both of those paths, I also have become a master at asking questions. I've also learned that part of my creative starvation was that my focus was always on other people. And so asking questions became a real skill. So that skill of curiosity, other than creativity, I honed. And so I'm curious about other people, other people's journeys, and every question teaches me and gives me information in order to take my own risks and go my own path. So part of the process and the goal and the motivation behind the She Made It podcast is that, to share my gift of curiosity And also because I have this incredible privilege to meet fantastic women and men too, who are creative, who are entrepreneurial, who have these amazing stories and journeys. I just really thought it would be fantastic to bring some of these incredible women on as guests so that I could interview them and tell their story. And they could teach you. They could inspire you. They could empower you because you may be in transition trying to figure out what's next, but you know that creativity, you know that creating is part of that. Maybe you're at the beginning, just out of college, and you want to be a creative entrepreneur, want to celebrate your talents through art. But our society is telling us that's not secure, that's not lucrative. Well, I want to share stories that will inspire you. And sometimes following your creative passion, that tug in you that says, this is what I love, this is how I'm designed. Sometimes those are the most lucrative paths. So I want to share some of those journeys. I want to share paths of creative healing. Women that are not in an art gallery. They're not making a business out of their art, but their art is healing them and others. Bringing them back to life in the midst of child raising or in the midst of a career that they love or maybe they don't love. But the core of who they are as a woman is their creativity and their artistry. I'm also going to share stories of women who are huge commercial successes and they've reached a pinnacle of success that we can admire and get a sneak peek behind the scenes into the journey. There are stories of women who made very intentional choices to pivot and some that have had accidental pivots. The thread between all of these women is the same as mine. It's the desire and passion to express myself, to create, to have creativity as a core part of their lives, and to express themselves as the unique and highly detailed, perfectly enough person that we are all made to be. So now I want to talk to you wherever you are, whether you're running a business, running a household, ready to make a move, or maybe you're right where I was. I invite you to join as we walk together through this journey of self-expression. Part of each episode, along with my guest interview, will be a conversation with my friend and creative collaborator, Clara. She's on my team, which means I'm lucky. She's a writer. She's newly married. She is the lover of all things aesthetic. And she too was born expressing herself. I have had the privilege of knowing Clara for her whole life, and I will tell you, I vividly remember performances of La Cenerentola.
La Cenerentola.
La Cenerentola, is
yes.
that right? Which I call the Italian Cinderella. It's a beautiful opera, and I will never forget Clara dancing into the living room as a 3-year-old in a beautiful little princess dress, singing full-on operatic Italian. And she has just always, been a creative inspiration for me, and she's going to weigh in. We're going to share conversations about each episode, and I just am so anxious and happy to welcome Clara.
Hi, Elle.
Hello, Clara.
Thank you so much for allowing me to be on this podcast with you.
Yeah.
I feel very honored.
Yeah.
But I will say that hearing the story of me singing as a 3-year-old, I would think that my singing career would have been a lot further along now than it is, but really it kind of ended there.
But Clara's a dancer, writer. I remember even a middle school, junior high, she organized a play, wrote, produced, directed a play for her neighborhood, and just always finding ways to develop and bring your creativity into your life and others.
Yeah, and I think that's why your openness to sharing your story with me has been so powerful since I've been here on your team for the past year is, like you said, I just graduated from college, just got married, and my whole life leading up really to college was really, really creative. I played the violin, I danced, I wrote, and now that I work full-time and am married and have to cook my own meals and go to the grocery store and do all those very normal life things, creativity doesn't happen as naturally and organically. And even though I haven't been through the journey of motherhood or running a business or anything like you share in your story, I still feel that same tug to express myself, but wait, I keep not doing it. And I think just hearing your story is both really powerful for me, knowing that that is something I have to keep finding outlets for myself, and I can't let myself fall asleep to my heart and what it needs to express. But it also helps me to be more adventurous in my day-to-day pursuits, whether it's trying hand lettering, even if I'm really bad at it right now, or just doing things that bring me joy. So your perspective has meant so much, even in a short amount of time to me. So that's why I'm so excited to get to share other women's stories with you on She Made It.
Yeah, and it's the focusing on the process, the journey, and life can feel like such, a focus on producing, delivering, that creativity just isn't that. It is this openness to process. So
Right. And I love when you said that you need to create things that don't have a purpose, that there's no reason that you're making them. And I think I tend to be a really duty-driven person where if I don't have to do something, I probably won't do it. And I think that's something that I'm learning right now, that it's worth doing something just because it would make you feel alive.
Right, exactly. Even if it feels frivolous.
Right.
Yeah, I also just wanted to share with you and with our listeners that, bringing the journey of other women is our job and our goal is to bring in women of all different ages, all different experiences, whether they have children or they're single or maybe married with no children. Because I just really have a passion for telling stories. And in fact, even several years ago, I started something called Pink Chandelier. And Pink Chandelier was an event-based sort of, celebration of a female business owner. And I would invite any woman to come along and learn that entrepreneur's journey into, what did they do to get into that business? How did that business grow? But also, what were the lessons, the resistances, the failures that they learned? And it was really fun and really successful. But I think with the podcast, we can take it to a broader audience. It's like, I think of it as like Pink Chandelier Live or Pink Chandelier on air, but now it's She Made It. And it's still, focusing on this celebration to share the journey of a woman creative, a woman entrepreneur, because I think many of us think it's daunting or impossible, or like you've said, it doesn't feel like we're producing anything. It feels frivolous.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think I was actually at your first Pink Chandelier event, and I'm also really excited that we can have people on who live across the country or people that we don't even know on the podcast. It's not just limited to people here in Cincinnati,
right,
where we are.
Yeah, and all different businesses. Like, in our first season, we have, a young photographer, a Broadway leading lady. We have a woman who owns these incredible, craft boutiques. We have artists who have stepped away from their art, but still find the ways to bring it into their day-to-day life without producing it as a business, and just so many different ways. But the goal is to show that it's doable, it's safe, it's easy, it can be done strategically, and by hearing the journeys of other women, the good, the bad, the ugly, that it's inspiration for all of us. And it is that our tagline, if she made it, you can too, because really it is powerful to see other women's stories. And I think it isn't just about arriving. It isn't about the product, the process, the exploration. It's about taking the step.
Totally. And I know I tend to see really successful people and think that there's something that makes them fundamentally different from me, that, oh, well, I might enjoy writing, but they have something that I don't, and that's why they're getting published. But that's really not true. And I think for any woman, whether our listener is already crazy successful and just wants more inspiration and to hear other women's stories, or whether she's just at the beginning and hasn't even started yet, I think these stories will help all of us to come together and see that we're all on the same journey.
If you were inspired by what you heard today, I would love for you to share it with a friend. And also, reviews are the number one way that this podcast will be able to help more people step into their creative life purpose, and I would be honored to have yours. I'm so grateful you joined us for today's episode. I bet you're here because you know there's something more for your life. Whether you're moving into something creative or letting go in order to take that next creative step, I have something for you. My free guide to graceful transitions. You can find it at lzimmerman.com/transitions. And remember, if she made it, you can too.